Subscribe now, it's absolutely free and there's no bill for you. The plasma bolt struck the human square in the chest. A direct hit. A kill shot. Commander Zuril of the Wraith Dominion watched through the targeting reticle, his fingers still clenched around the trigger of his pulse rifle. The battle had been relentless, the humans proving to be more resilient than any species the Dominion had ever encountered. But now at least one of their warriors was down. Or so Zuril thought. The smoke cleared, revealing the human standing right where he had been before, his combat armor scorched, but his expression unchanged. Then he did something that sent a chill through the Wraith commandos. He laughed. Zuril's mandibles clicked in confusion. No species in the known galaxy could take a direct plasma shot to the chest and remain standing. The human should have collapsed, screaming in pain, his nervous system fried by the impact. Instead, the human rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck and grinned. The Dominion soldiers hesitated. In all their battles they had never seen an enemy behave like this. Fear should have gripped the human. Instead he took a step forward. Zuril barked an order. Fire again. Bring him down. A volley of plasma bolts erupted from the squad's rifles. Bright streaks of energy cut through the battlefield, each one striking the human in rapid succession. Smoke and dust swirled around him, obscuring their view. Then the dust settled. The human was still standing. He touched his chest, inspecting the damage. His armor was scorched, the plating cracked in some places, but he was very much alive. A deep chuckle rumbled from his throat. That tickled. Zuril took an involuntary step back. His mind raced, trying to rationalize what he was seeing. Humans were supposed to be fragile. They were supposed to die like all the others. And yet this one didn't. The human launched forward. He moved with a speed that defied his size, covering the distance between them in seconds. Before Zuril could react, the human was upon them. A massive fist crashed into the nearest Wraith soldier, sending him flying backward like a rag doll. Another soldier tried to raise his weapon, but the human grabbed it, twisting the barrel with his bare hands until it crumpled like soft metal. Panic erupted in the Dominion ranks. This wasn't just a skilled enemy, this was something else. Something they weren't prepared for. Zuril activated his comlink. Reinforcements now. We have an unidentified threat. It's not dying. The human snapped his head toward him, his grin widening. Not dying? He repeated, voice laced with amusement. Buddy, I haven't even gotten started. He grabbed a fallen Wraith soldier by the throat and hurled him into two others, knocking them to the ground. Plasma rifles were useless against him, and their hand-to-hand combat techniques were proving even worse. Zuril's heart pounded. What was this thing? The sound of approaching Dominion gunships filled the air. Reinforcements had arrived. They hovered overhead, their mounted cannons locking onto the human below. Stand down? Zuril commanded. You're surrounded. The human finally stopped moving. He stood in the center of the battlefield, Wraith bodies littered around him. He tilted his head as if considering the situation. Then he did something even more terrifying. He smirked and raised his fists. All right. Round 2. Let's see what you got. The gunships fired their heavy cannons, unleashing a storm of plasma rounds. The ground erupted in explosions, dust and debris filling the air. Zuril watched, expecting the human to be obliterated. But when the smoke cleared, he was still there. He had moved, faster than anything should be able to move, dodging between the blasts with terrifying precision. His smirk never wavered as he leaped into the air, catching hold of a low-flying gunship's landing strut. The pilot panicked, veering wildly, but the human climbed his way up, smashing through the cockpit glass with a single punch. He ripped the pilot from his seat, tossing him out before seizing the controls himself. Zuril watched in stunned disbelief as the stolen Dominion gunship turned in midair and opened fire on the rest of the fleet. Laser cannons roared to life, decimating the Dominion forces that had moments before been their own reinforcement. Soldiers scattered, screaming, their lines collapsing as their own air support betrayed them. Zuril's mind raced. This isn't possible. Humans weren't this strong. They weren't this fast. They weren't supposed to be able to do things like this. Yet here he was, watching his forces be systematically destroyed by a single man. A single, unstoppable man. The human piloted the gunship with terrifying efficiency, looping through the sky as if he had trained for years in Dominion tech. He wasn't just surviving this battle. He was enjoying it. Zuril clenched his fists. This was no ordinary soldier. This was something else entirely. The Dominion had made a mistake. A mistake that was about to cost them everything. Zuro barely had time to react before the stolen Dominion gunship twisted midair, its cannons raining destruction upon his forces. The very reinforcement they had called in had become their doom, piloted by a single human. "This isn't possible," he murmured, watching his soldiers scramble for cover. "No species in the galaxy should be able to do this." The gunship roared overhead, strafing the battlefield, its plasma bolts tearing through Dominion formations. Some Wraith commandos managed to return fire, their shots pelting the hull, but the ship stayed airborne, maneuvering in ways Dominion pilots never could. Then, as suddenly as he had stolen it, the human jumped. Zuro's breath hitched as the human leapt from the cockpit mid-flight, plummeting toward the ground below. No being should have survived a fall like that, but the human twisted in the air, rolling as he impacted the dirt. Then he stood up, completely unharmed. Dust and debris swirled around him, his silhouette cutting through the chaos like an omen of death. Zuro knew fear in that moment. "Suppressive fire," he roared, his voice laced with desperation. The remaining Dominion troops unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, the air thick with deadly energy. Explosions erupted all around the human, but he didn't falter. He charged. Zuro had never seen anything like it. Plasma bolts that should have melted flesh barely slowed the human down. His armor was blackened, the plating cracked, but he moved like a force of nature, shrugging off wounds that would have killed anything else. A Dominion soldier tried to stop him with a vibroblade, swinging at the human's exposed side. The human caught the blade with his bare hands. A sickening crunch echoed across the battlefield as the human snapped the blade in half, his fingers tightening around the metal like it was mere twigs. He stared at the Wraith soldier, who stumbled back in sheer horror. "Nice try," the human said before driving his fist into the soldier's gut, sending him flying backward like a broken doll. More soldiers rushed forward, desperation replacing strategy. The human met them head-on, his movements a whirlwind of brutality. He was faster, stronger, relentless. One soldier tried to strike from behind, only for the human to grab his wrist without looking, twisting it until bones snapped. Another aimed a plasma rifle point blank at the human's head, but before he could pull the trigger, the human ducked, dodging the blast before delivering a punishing uppercut that shattered the soldier's helmet. Zuro took slow, measured steps back, his mind racing. Every Dominion battle doctrine revolved around understanding their enemies, learning their weaknesses, exploiting their limits. But what do you do when the enemy has no limits? He had heard stories, whispered legends about human resilience, their unnatural will to fight. But this wasn't resilience. This was madness. The Dominion had fought countless species. The strength of the Ricari, the cunning of the Felisari, the brutality of the Zao. And yet, not a single one could match what was unfolding before him. Because humans didn't just fight. They endured. The battlefield was a graveyard of his soldiers. Smoke rose in thick columns and the once proud Dominion formations lay in ruin. One man had done this. One man had turned the tide of an entire war zone with nothing but his hands, his will and the sheer refusal to die. Zuro's comlink crackled. "Commander, we need to retreat. We're being overrun." He barely heard the voice. His gaze was locked on the human, who stood among the bodies, panting slightly, his grin never fading. Then the human spoke and his words chilled Zuro to the core. "You're starting to bore me?" The Dominion's line was in full collapse. Officers shouted conflicting orders, some calling for retreat, others urging the troops to hold their ground. But it was useless. Panic had set in and discipline was unraveling like loose thread. A Wraith sniper, perched on a crumbling outpost, aimed his high-powered rifle at the human's head. He fired. The bullet struck. The human barely flinched. Zuro watched in horror as the human reached up and plucked the bullet from his skull, staring at it like an amusing trinket. "That's new," he mused, flicking it away. The sniper, realizing what had just happened, abandoned his position and ran. The human turned toward Zuro, locking eyes with him. Something primal took hold of the Wraith commander. Something ancient, buried in the instincts of all sentient beings. Fear. His feet moved before he could process the decision. He ran. He ran like his life depended on it. Behind him, the human's laughter followed. Zuro ran. His mind screamed at him, trying to rationalize what had just happened. No warrior should be able to endure that much punishment. No body should be able to withstand multiple plasma blasts, a free fall from a gunship, and a sniper's bullet to the skull, and still keep going Yet the human was laughing. The Wraith commander had faced countless enemies. He had fought in the bloodiest skirmishes, led his forces against rebels and planetary defenses alike, but nothing, nothing in his long career had prepared him for this. He had heard the whispers, the rumors. Humans were insane. Humans didn't know when to die, but legends were one thing. Reality was another. He sprinted through the crumbling battlefield, past the wreckage of Dominion gunships and the twisted remains of what had once been an elite squad of warriors. His commandos were breaking, scattering like frightened vermin. He didn't blame them. The human was still standing and he was coming. Zurul activated his comlink. Command. Emergency extraction. Immediate withdrawal required. Static. He cursed. The battle had devolved into chaos so quickly that long-range transmissions were likely jammed. The Dominion hadn't planned for this. No one had. A flicker of movement in the corner of his vision made his stomach drop. The human was toying with them. Zurul had seen him move at unnatural speeds before, but now he understood something far worse. The human wasn't in a hurry. He was enjoying this. The monstrous figure was deliberately letting them run, hunting them like prey, grinning as he advanced through the wreckage-strewn field. The embers of a burning ship reflected in his maddened eyes. Zurul's breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed himself forward. His only chance was the emergency evac point, just beyond the next ridge. If he could get there, if he could warn the Dominion. A shadow loomed over him. The impact came before he could react. A massive hand grabbed his shoulder, wrenching him backward with bone-snapping force. His vision blurred, the world tilting as his body crashed into the dirt. The human loomed over him, silhouetted against the firelit sky. Running already? The voice was mocking, laced with amusement. Zurul struggled to rise, his limbs betraying him. His strength meant nothing here. The human crouched, tilting his head. His face was streaked with blood, some of it his own, but far more of it belonged to the Wraith ***. He grinned. You Dominion types always talk a big game. Conquering worlds. Breaking civilizations. But when things don't go your way, he trailed off, chuckling. You scatter like insects. Zurul clenched his jaw. His fingers twitched toward his sidearm. The human noticed. A flash of movement, too fast to follow. And then pain exploded through Zurul's wrist as his weapon was ripped from his grasp. The human studied the energy pistol in his hands, weighing it in his grip. Then, to Zurul's horror, he crushed it, metal and circuits folding inward like crumpled paper. The remains dropped to the ground with a dull clatter. Zurul's pulse thundered in his ears. His breath was coming in quick, sharp gasps. What are you? The human exhaled through his nose, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. I'm just a guy who doesn't know when to quit. Zurul felt cold. Not from the night air, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer, gut-wrenching certainty that nothing in the Dominion's arsenal could stop what stood before him. The human didn't kill him immediately. No, that would have been too merciful. Instead, he leaned in, close enough that Zurul could smell the blood and sweat on his skin. Run back to your people, the human murmured. Tell them what you saw. Tell them what's coming. A shiver raced down Zurul's spine. The human stepped back, straightening to his full height. Because next time? His grin widened, exposing blood-stained teeth. I won't let you run. Zurul didn't hesitate. He turned and bolted. Behind him, the human simply watched, arms crossed, his laughter echoing in the darkness. The Dominion had invaded this world, believing it to be just another conquest. They had no idea they had awoken a nightmare. Zurul ran without direction, only knowing that he had to get away. He barely noticed when he reached the emergency evac point, panting and shaking as he slammed his hand onto the beacon. The sky cracked with the roar of approaching Dominion transports, engines burning as they descended. As the dropship's doors opened, a squad of reinforcements rushed out, weapons raised. Commander. Report. Zurul turned to them, chest heaving. We have to leave. Now. The soldiers looked confused, but when they saw the battlefield behind him, their faces paled. Where is the enemy? One of them asked. Zurul's lips trembled. He looked back one last time at the darkened horizon, where the human still stood, watching them go. You don't understand, Zurul whispered. He's still there, The reinforcements exchanged uneasy glances. Just one human? One asked. That's what did this? Zurul's eyes darkened. You don't get it? His voice was barely above a whisper. He let me live, on purpose. The soldier hesitated. Why? Zurul clenched his fists, stepping into the dropship. To send a message. As the ramp closed, sealing them inside, Zurul slumped against the cold metal, his mind racing. The Dominion had made a fatal mistake. And now they would never be safe again. The Dominion fleet stood in eerie silence as Zurul was escorted from the transport. His steps were unsteady, his limbs trembling. Soldiers and officers stared at him as he passed, their faces filled with unspoken questions. He could feel their gazes burning into his back, but he had no answers to give. He had survived the battle, but he had not won. No one had. In the War Council chambers, high-ranking Dominion officials surrounded him, their holographic displays flickering with battle reports. The room buzzed with an uneasy energy. Grand Strategist Velner, a battle-scarred veteran of the Dominion, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. Commander Zurul, Velner's voice was sharp, controlled. You were in command of an entire Dominion battalion. You had aerial support, mechanized reinforcements, and orbital superiority. And yet, you returned to us with nothing but a broken formation. Explain. Zurul swallowed hard, the image of the human's blood-stained grin flashing in his mind. We underestimated them. Velner scoffed. Them? Reports indicate one human was responsible for the majority of our losses. One commander. You ran from one soldier. Zurul's hands curled into fists. He wasn't a soldier. He was a force of nature. The council erupted into murmurs. Some laughed. Others exchanged concerned glances. Velner's mandibles twitched in annoyance. We have studied humans extensively, Commander. They are resilient, yes. Reckless, perhaps. But they die like any other creature. Zurul slammed his hands onto the table, his breath ragged. No, they don't. His voice cracked with something close to hysteria. We shot him. He laughed. We hit him with everything we had. Plasma, explosives, sniper rounds. He took it all and kept coming. You think I ran out of cowardice? I ran because I had no choice. Because he let me? Silence. Velner studied him carefully. Let you? Zurul forced himself to steady his breathing. He knew how he sounded. He knew that, without proof, this would sound like the ramblings of a broken commander. But he had seen it, lived it, survived it. He let me go, Zurul whispered. To send a message. The room darkened. Every council member stiffened. And what was this message? Velner finally asked. Zurul met his gaze, his voice low, haunted. That the Dominion is nothing to him. That our weapons, our tactics, our superiority, none of it matters, he wanted me to come back and tell you. To warn you? He exhaled shakily. He's coming, The war room fell into stunned silence. The council, so used to dominion over countless species, had never heard fear like this from one of their own. Velner leaned back, his expression unreadable. Do you expect us to believe that one human can pose a legitimate threat to our entire empire? Zurul swallowed. I don't care what you believe. I care that we aren't prepared for this. He doesn't fight like the others. He doesn't break. He doesn't stop. You think this is an isolated incident? What if there are more like him? That single thought sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. The Dominion had faced rebellions. They had crushed insurgencies. But they had never encountered something that didn't recognize the concept of defeat. The human hadn't won the battle through strategy or overwhelming numbers. He had won because he refused to lose. The War Council remained unconvinced. But in the coming weeks, more reports surfaced. More encounters with human soldiers, and they all told the same story. Entire squads wiped out. Assassins sent after high-priority targets who never returned. Ships that vanished without a trace, their last transmissions filled with laughter. They couldn't be stopped. And the worst part? They were just getting started. Velner sat in his chambers later that night, alone, reviewing Zurul's battle footage. He watched the human take every shot, every explosion, shrugging it off like an annoyance. He studied the face of the enemy, the gleam in his eye, the smirk he wore like a badge of honor. He closed the terminal and sat back, mandibles clicking in thought. For the first time in his long, decorated career, Velner felt fear. He activated his private comms link. Prepare contingency plans. The war against humanity has begun. The reply came almost immediately. Orders, Grand Strategist? Velner hesitated. Then, in a voice that betrayed nothing, he said, Survival. End of story.